She stood there in the middle of the aisle, red-faced and shouting, "That's MY's seat. I paid for it." The entire plane went silent. I was still holding my boarding pass, calm but confused. "Ma'am," I said quietly, "this is 14A, your ticket says 15A. But Karen wasn't listening. She was too busy waving her arms at the flight attendant, trying to make it look like I was the problem. "He's lying. Make him move before I call security." The flight attendant looked between us, her smile fading fast. People started whispering. I could feel eyes on me, some recording, some just waiting for drama. Karen snapped her fingers at the attendant. "Do your job. Remove him," she barked. That's when I noticed her designer bag tossed on my seat, as if she already owned it. I gently lifted it and handed it to her. "You might want to check again," I said. "This is my ticket. First class upgrade, confirmed this morning." Her face froze for a second, but then she smirked. "Oh please, there's no way someone like you could afford first class." That line hit harder than she knew. The guy in the next row shifted awkwardly, sensing how wrong that sounded. I didn't reply. I just reached into my jacket and handed my ID to the flight attendant. Her eyes widened as she read the name, then she looked at me with sudden respect. "Captain Hayes." As in, she stopped mid-sentence and gave me a small nod. Karen rolled her eyes. "Captain of what? Some discount airline," she scoffed, loud enough for the whole cabin to hear. The flight attendant leaned closer to her and whispered something I couldn't hear, but the color drained from Karen's face instantly. She looked at me, blinking fast, and stammered, "Why, you're the same Hayes who..." She didn't finish. I just smiled faintly and said, "Please, have your seat, ma'am. We all have a flight to catch." But even as she sat down, trembling, I knew this wasn't over. Her pride wouldn't let it be. She turned halfway and muttered, "You'll regret this." I looked out the window, calm as ever, but deep down, I already knew what she didn't. This plane wasn't just any flight, and I wasn't just any passenger. An hour into the flight, things finally seemed quiet. The hum of the engines, the soft chatter, it almost felt normal again. I was halfway through my coffee when I saw Karen whispering to another passenger, a man in a suit who looked uneasy but curious. She kept glancing at me, pretending to smile when I caught her. I could tell she was planning something. Then she pressed the call button and pointed at me. "This man's recording me," she shouted suddenly. The flight attendant rushed over. Karen pointed again, voice rising, "He's got some hidden device. He's filming me and threatening me." Passengers turned their heads, confused and startled. My heart sank. I hadn't even touched my phone. The attendant hesitated. "Ma'am, please calm down. No, he's dangerous. I saw him sneak something under his seat." She screamed, her voice shaking but loud enough for half the cabin to hear. A man in the back yelled, "Is everything okay up there?" Before I could speak, 2 air marshals stood up from the back. Karen gasped like she'd been waiting for that moment. "See, I told you, arrest him," she cried out, pointing at me like I was some kind of threat. My hands were still on my tray. I looked straight at the marshals, calm. "Check the seat if you'd like," I said quietly. One of them crouched down and pulled out a small metal case from under my seat, my pilot's flight case. Karen smirked triumphantly. "There. What did I say?" The marshal looked at the case tag and froze. His tone changed instantly. "Ma'am, this belongs to Captain Daniel Hayes of the Federal Aviation Safety Board." The entire cabin went dead silent. Karen's jaw dropped. What?" she stammered. The other marshal looked at her coldly. "He's one of the FAA's senior flight investigators, ma'am. You just accused him of a federal offense on a plane." Karen blinked fast, suddenly pale. I didn't know. He was being weird, I thought. I stood up slowly, looking her in the eyes. "You thought you could lie your way into getting me thrown off this flight," I said softly. "You don't realize how serious what you just did is." She tried to laugh it off, voice trembling. "Oh come on, it was just a misunderstanding." I turned to the marshal. "Leave her be for now. I want to land safely first." Then I looked back at Karen. "But when we do, you'll find out what real turbulence feels like." The cabin stayed painfully quiet after that. Karen didn't move, didn't speak, just stared ahead with her arms crossed tight. I could feel her anger boiling under that fake calm. Every few minutes, she'd glance at her phone, typing furiously. Then she stood up again, wobbling as the seatbelt light blinked on. "I need to report this to the airline," she said loudly. This man abused his power. The flight attendant blocked her path gently. "Ma'am, please sit down, we're experiencing turbulence." Karen scoffed. "Oh, I bet he planned that too," she snapped, pointing at me. "You all think he's some kind of hero, but he's just another control freak." I sighed and turned slightly toward her. "You really don't know when to stop, do you?" Her voice cracked but stayed loud. "I have every right to speak. You don't own this plane." The words hit the air, and right then, the captain's voice came through the speaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Lewis speaking. Sitting in seat 14A today is a very special guest, Captain Daniel Hayes, FAA Safety Board. He's one of the few people who trained most of us to fly safely. We're honored to have him on board." The timing was perfect. Every passenger turned toward me, clapping lightly. Even the flight attendant smiled with relief. Karen's face turned scarlet. She sank into her seat like she wanted to disappear. The man beside her muttered under his breath, "Guess you picked the wrong fight, lady." But Karen wasn't done. She leaned toward me and whispered, "You think this applause scares me? My brother's a regional manager for this airline. When we land, you'll be the one escorted out." I looked at her calmly and said, "Then I hope he enjoys reviewing the footage." She frowned. "What footage?" I held up my smartwatch, the small red light still blinking. "FAA protocol, ma'am. My device records any onboard disturbance when my ID is scanned. You've been on camera since you raised your voice the first time." Her expression froze completely. I could see her throat move as she swallowed hard. For the first time since we boarded, she didn't have a single word to say. But the real twist hadn't hit her yet, and when it did, the whole plane would see exactly who she truly was. The moment the wheels touched down, Karen jumped up before the seatbelt sign even turned off. "I'm filing a report," she shouted, trying to sound brave, though her voice shook. The passengers around her groaned. Everyone had seen enough. The air marshals stood up quietly, signaling her to wait, but she ignored them and pushed forward. As we all disembarked, she stormed toward the gate desk, waving her phone and yelling, "I want this man detained. He threatened me and tampered with the flight." Her voice carried across the terminal. People began pulling out their phones, recording again. She didn't notice the uniformed man walking up behind her until he spoke. "Ma'am," he said calmly, "you're speaking to Captain Hayes of the Federal Aviation Safety Board. We've already reviewed the live footage from his device." Karen turned slowly, her face pale. Behind me stood two TSA officers and the same air marshal from the plane, both watching her closely. "Footage," she whispered. "Yes, ma'am," the marshal said. "It shows you falsifying a security claim mid-flight, harassing a federal officer, and attempting to incite panic." He paused, then added quietly, "That's a felony." Karen's confidence cracked right there. I didn't mean to. He was sitting in my seat." She stammered. I looked at her with the same calm I'd kept since the beginning. "No, ma'am, you were sitting in mine. And you nearly caused an emergency over your pride." She dropped her phone, her hands trembling. The crowd watching had grown larger, murmuring. Someone whispered, "That's the lady who screamed on the plane." The air marshal sighed and nodded to the officers. "Take her for questioning." As they led her away, she turned one last time and said softly, "I just wanted some respect." I nodded. "Respect isn't taken by shouting, Karen. It's earned by how you treat people." The terminal fell silent again. I walked toward the exit, the late sunlight spilling through the glass doors. The same flight attendant from earlier caught up to me and said quietly, "You handled that with more patience than anyone could." I smiled faintly and replied, "You don't fight every battle in the air. Some you win by just staying grounded." That line echoed in my head as I left the airport, because in the end, justice didn't need noise. It just needed truth to finally take flight. The end. Subscribe my YouTube channel for more stories.